excited that you're back with us for another episode of Meet My Mississippi Authors and Artists. And you know I have the most amazing guests. I have so many friends that I want to introduce you to. But mainly I let them introduce themselves. So today we have who?
Hi, I'm Jody Hill. I'm the Vice President for Community Relations at Blue Mountain College, and I also pastor at Ripley Presbyterian Church. But I'm here today on Patricia's invitation to speak about my book, 38, The Chucky Mullins Effect.
Wonderful. I am so excited about this. I always start with how I met the person that I'm talking to. So we met, I had an invitation to speak at the Ripley Rotary Club.
Yes.
And so after I did my spiel with my book and did my poems and everything, you were telling me about your book, and I was like, yes, we got to get this out here. And this is the platform that I use to, with all the friends that I've met and author friends, to let people know about the book. So first, tell us about your growing up. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to high school, college? All of that listing stuff so people will get that connection.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Tippah County in Faulkner, a little spot in the road there in the north part of the county, and attended Faulkner High School. And after that, I went to Ole Miss. I played football there, so I joined the team in 1988 along with Chucky Mullins. And for those who aren't familiar with Chucky's story, he grew up in Russellville, Alabama, and he was an overachiever, you know, a young man who had aspirations growing up in Alabama of playing for the Crimson Tide, but they didn't come calling. And in fact, none of the SEC schools offered him a scholarship initially, but then he basically talked his way onto the Ole Miss squad by impressing our coach Billy Brewer with his desire and passion and his willingness to overachieve. So that was where I attended school. We were freshmen together, and for those who are unfamiliar with his story, Chucky was injured our freshman year, sustained a spinal injury making a tackle in a football game against Vanderbilt University.
And what year was that?
Okay, that was 1989. So we redshirted. That means you have a year of college without playing in sports, so you still have a year of eligibility remaining. So that was in 1989 in October on homecoming day there at the school. And yeah, it was a very traumatic experience.
Wow. So what part of the game was that in? Was it near the beginning or?
It was in the first half.
Really?
Yeah, it was. So and when he made the tackle, he instantly became paralyzed from the neck down, a quadriplegic. So his whole world, and for that matter, certainly the world of the university and for much of Mississippi, changed forever.
And why is he such an inspiration, or was he such an inspiration and is such an inspiration to so many people at the university and in Mississippi for you, and why did you decide to write the book?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because we love the title, The Chucky Mullins Effect.
Yeah, isn't that great?
So tell us about that.
And I think that was the part that inspired me and so many. There's so many levels of why Chucky was and still is an inspiration. One, his growing up, he was the child of a one-parent home, and unfortunately, the only parent he did have, his mother, died when he was still a young child. So he had his grandmother, who was a strong sense of respect and guidance in his life. Well, then she died shortly thereafter too. So Chucky was placed in foster care as a young person, and throughout his life he knew one adversity after another. So beyond the injury, he's a person of inspiration because he overcame so many hardships, whether they be financial, relational. He never let those define him. As I stated, he was really not a very large person for a football player, and he wasn't that fast either, so he overcame any limitations with extra effort, with a brilliant smile, and with a winning attitude and personality. So that's that's
a story for everybody to learn from. Oh, my goodness.
Absolutely. And prior to the injury, even, Chucky had one of these infectious personalities. oftentimes when you're part of groups, and I know you've seen this, whether it be in college or in your sorority that you're active part of, sometimes you have different groups, maybe cliques, we would call them at times. And that certainly is true in college athletics. There's certain guys that maybe hang out or are friends with others. Maybe you have the starters that hang out together, or the linemen, or maybe certain groups of skill positions, or certain races for that matter, that kind of run together. But Chucky transcended every one of those groups, and he was friends, intimate friends, with every person. It didn't matter if you were a star player or a walk-on player. It didn't matter if you were black or white or brown or pink, or what your financial standing was. He was a friend to you.
That's
so
beautiful.
He was an amazing person on the surface, and so that all predated the injury. And he was known for his smile. An example of that, Patricia, is certainly being a foster child and not having his own family support system. He didn't have a lot of financial stability. His foster parents did a wonderful job of caring for Chucky, and gave all that they could, but still there were limits to what he had. And I remember one of my friends saying, well, did you not ever notice that Chucky didn't have a lot of outfits? He always wore the same clothes kind of over and over. And I said, yeah, you know, I never noticed that. I absolutely never noticed that, because
it wasn't important.
The thing I noticed was his smile.
Absolutely.
I noticed his smile and his vibrance, and how he made you smile.
Absolutely.
And made your day better. So that was part of his story prior to the injury. But even after the injury, he responded to that traumatic experience with such integrity. And such vibrance and such inspiration.
And there were so many stories about him as they were going along with his treatment and all that, and how he was handling it, and all of that. And the school really put him out there as far as, you know, keeping up with all of that. So,
He never let the injury define him. It was how he responded to the injury that, you know, spoke to.
And isn't that a lesson for all of us? Whatever happens to us in life is just like how we respond to whatever happens to us.
Yeah, amen. You know, one person, and you'll appreciate this with your academic training, and your story's quite amazing too. I wish we could spend the time talking about it, but with your psychology. Chucky was visiting with a person trained in psychology, a lady who was reached out to him. She was an alum of Ole Miss. Shortly thereafter the injury, she said, I went to see this young man in the hospital, and she said, I was quite taken aback at his response, how he was responding very positively, and she thought, well, it's just a matter of time, you know, before it sets in, and she wanted to be a resource for him. So she kept going back, and she started realizing that she was getting more out of the visits than Chucky was. It was helping her more than it was him. And she described Chucky as this. She said, for me, and you may have heard of this before, she said, for me, Chucky described and defined what it means to be a thermostat person. And
you determine the atmosphere.
You know, she said so often when we're faced with challenging circumstances in life,
we thermometer. We react to whatever the environment
certainly
is.
And I'm a perennial thermometer. You know, when things are good, I'm up, I'm on top of the world, but when things are down, you know, sometimes we go down with what's happening, or maybe the other's true. Somebody turns the heat up on us, we can get right back
at
it.
And he set the whole environment and the tone.
And instead of being impacted by what was happening around him,
we should all aspire to that.
He was steady and set the temperature, as you said.
That is wonderful. Now tell us, okay, this is your author part. Here. Now, when did you decide to write the book? How did you get started? Who published the book? How long did it take you to get all your facts and figures? And did you interview people? Well, how did you go about getting your book?
So I lived with this story since it happened
And
30
you
years
really
ago
actually
almost.
lived with the story.
Yes. Yes.
Now tell us about the book. How did you really get into writing the book? When did you start writing the book and all of that?
Yeah, sure. So I lived with the story from the time of the injury until I was into my 30s, and I started thinking about, this story really needs to be captured. There'd been other books and certainly articles written about Chucky's life, but I felt like there was something missing from the personal, those of us who knew him, those of us who played with him and were part of those locker room stories, those more intimate details. Right. So that was part of the inspiration, is that I felt like we, teammates, had a story to tell, but also, Patricia, the journey of writing this book was, I wanted to know more about him. Okay. I wanted to know what made him tick. Okay. I was so inspired by my friend and this inspiration. I wanted to know what drove him, so I thought that going through that process would educate me. Right. It would enhance my journey too. So that was kind of what fueled the effort. I knew the story needed to be told, and I wanted to learn more about it and be inspired more. So that was the inspiration. The process began in 2013. I reached out to Carver and Karen Phillips, my dear friends, Chucky's foster parents, and asked them, to allow me to be part of the story, or them to be part of the story, to help me tell about his message. And they were willing to do so, and so that's where we began the interview process. I interviewed certainly, probably 30 to 50 people, teammates, caregivers, medical professionals who were a part of high school coaches, administrators, people who were a part of Chucky's life and who he was a part of their life.
That is a huge undertaking. Were you a writer before this? Did you like to write or anything like that? My goodness.
Not so much. A friend of mine that I played football with, Clint Conley, who actually lives here in New Albany, after I'd written the book, he said, I'm going to read this book. He said, I hadn't read a book since we've gotten out of college.
And that's the story for so many people, that they haven't read a book since high school. Yeah. And I hate to hear that. It makes me just cringe.
And I know, and I tell him, I said, well, don't worry, I hadn't written a book before either, so we'll begin this together. But I enjoyed writing. In my professional training as an ordained minister, I had an affection for writing and reading. Yes. And so no, I'd not written before. Wow. I just took off and felt like the story needed to be told.
That is wonderful.
I learned as I went.
What is the Chucky Mullen effect?
Yeah, that's great.
The overall caption of it. What is it? What have you learned that the Chucky Mullen's effect is?
Yeah, sure. Initially, and Patricia, you can relate to this in many ways. When you start writing, you may have a vision or an idea of where you want to go, and then oftentimes,
it takes you somewhere else.
Yes,
That's
story,
the beauty of it.
Amen. It takes on a life of itself.
Yes.
So I dabbled with the idea of the Chucky Mullen story. Okay. 38 is the primary title, and his number is so central to so many things, and we can't escape that number. Right. I mean, and I discussed this in the book, but. Okay. Ever since the injury, the number just is repetitively coming up before us to say, hey, don't forget this story. Don't forget me. So, and that's for teammates and those who are impacted. But the effect, as I began and as I shared, I thought it would be mostly biographical on Chucky, and it was. But after I interviewed these people,
it went in so many different.
Yeah, it wasn't just his story.
Lots of people.
But it was his effect upon their story.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, so much of the book, a large portion of it is not just about Chucky personally.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But his personal impact and effect upon other people, how he poured into their life. This is it. What's the Chucky Mullen's effect? In a nutshell, one person said to me, after hearing Chucky's story and knowing more about him, they said, I suspect in learning about Chucky through this story, if he had the opportunity to go back and change everything and not have gone through the injury, I'm not sure he would have changed it.
Okay.
Knowing how many lives were impacted
touched. Yeah.
and affected.
Absolutely.
You know. And Patricia.
Because I didn't even know the story or whatever, but the university would always put these pictures of him up and in the hospital and all these kind of things. He'd be smiling, and I'd be like, what in the world? What,
oh, my,
what
yeah,
is,
yeah, wow.
What
yeah.
in the world?
That's true. And he broke down, and I deal with this some in the book, too. He broke down so many barriers.
Yes, yes.
Whether they be social, economic, racial, because Ole Miss, you know,
we need that.
was seen
And
kind of as an uppity school.
Yeah, and all of that. You know,
absolutely.
We need to bridge gaps.
Amen. Amen.
And we can do that with telling our stories. I really believe that.
Stories
if
powerful.
we can just tell our stories,
yes,
that we will bridge those gaps. You know, economic, racial, all those kind of things, geographical.
That's so true.
And that's so important. So now, when did they do the Chucky Mullins Way in Oxford? Do you know what year that was that they made that Chucky Mullins Way?
Not specifically. I know it was a few years ago.
Okay.
It was, I'm going to say, sometime around 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every time we go, because my son's he's going to be Ole Miss this
Oh, okay,
year, so,
great.
we're excited about that. I always look at the sign. I think of your book and I think of his story all the time. So, yeah. And do they do something with the jerseys? Were the blue jerseys something that had to do with him or something?
What they do is each year they award someone the opportunity and the honor of wearing his number 38. So it's oftentimes it's a very outstanding player who has accomplished a lot on the field, but more than that, it's a person of character and leadership and who represents everything that Chucky did, perseverance. So that's a great high honor, and I discuss that in the book some too, about some of those who share about what it meant to them to be able to embrace that 38 and represent everything that Chucky stood for.
So what is the message that you want readers to get out of the book, the 38, and the Chucky Mullins effect, the overall?
Yeah, the overall message is we can't always, quite often, we can't determine the hand we're dealt. You know, we can't choose the situation or circumstances, but we can choose how we respond to those.
Absolutely.
You know, we can make a decision every day to not be defined by what's placed upon us.
Absolutely.
But how are we going to write? And he is the ultimate example of that. I tell people, at the end of the day, Chucky Mullins is the best guy I ever knew.
Wow.
And his story needs to be known. It needs to be heard.
We're going to be a little part of doing that here at the Hill Country Network to get the story out. Now we're going to switch a little gears just a little bit. Tell us what you do at Blue Mountain College. Tell us a little about Blue Mountain College, a little bit of the history of it. And I love Blue Mountain College because every other teacher in Mississippi came out of Blue Mountain College. And I'm all about the teachers and educators. And like I was telling you, I want you to tell all of them about Meet My Mississippi because we really want to get that in the curriculum. But tell us about Blue Mountain College.
And Blue Mountain College was founded in 1873 as a girls' college.
Yes.
And partnered with the Mississippi Baptist Convention in 1920 for the purpose to begin educating some men for those who were studying ministry. So they allowed them, as long as they'd sit in the back of the room, they could go there. We started to see, and it was just became a world-class place, as you said, educating teachers. I shared earlier that my friend James Story said that, you know, Blue Mountain College, he's a retired principal in Ripley, wonderful guy, former football player at Ole Miss too. Looks like he could still play, but James said, you know, Jody, Blue Mountain College turns out the homegrown tomatoes of school teachers. And that defines our teachers so many ways. It goes back to the 40s even, when people were looking for a teacher. If they had a chance to get a girl from Blue Mountain, they rose to the top. So, and part of that is it's their sweet spot. That's their greatest heritage, educating preachers and teachers, we like to say. But the new day at Blue Mountain College is we still place great emphasis on our roots, the preachers and teachers. But now the fastest growing major is in business. We went fully co-educational in 2006. So about 40% of our student population now are guys, so they still like their chances with the girls because they're significant number. But we've really gone through a growth strategy over the last few years. We've had record enrollment the last 3 years, and that's to be attributed to a campaign we know as Grow BMC. Our president has provided great leadership, Dr. Barbara Childers McMillan, and she received what we believe was a vision from God to how do we grow this school through engaging students in their extracurricular, and that's the word we use. We want to engage students, give them a reason to be there, whether it be through the sport of softball or playing in the marching band or being a part of the drama team or bass fishing or archery. It gives students an opportunity to come there and continue to do what they love.
Wonderful.
And it also provides an economic assistance to them. We provide, on average, about $5,000 in scholarships to each of those students, whether they be in athletics or extracurricular. Our little school there in Blue Mountain, Mississippi will award in excess of $3 million every year to local students here in our region trying to be educated in a Christ-centered environment. So it's a really special place, and with the help of our gracious donors and a partnership with the Mississippi Baptist Convention, we keep our tuition rates really on par, more evenly embraced with the public schools in our state than any private school. So we couldn't do that without those who really want to be part of making a difference in a small environment.
Like I said, every other teacher that I talk to, they're saying, oh, I went to Blue Mountain College, but I was at a festival here in New Albany during the Easter break, and a young man came up to me. He was probably, well, he had been 20 or something, and he was like, oh, I want to get your book because I wrote about your book. For one of my papers, he said, I went to go to Blue Mountain College, and I wanted to let you know I got an A on my paper about your book. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's great. So
that's terrific.
You all are doing a great work at Blue Mountain College because you're helping to educate our students. And was there something in the past, they had some kind of literary festival a long time ago at Blue Mountain?
Yes, it actually began at Blue Mountain back, and we're still a part of that organization.
Now, what was that? Because they have some kind of historic marker.
Yeah, the Southern Literary Festival began. Yes, it's right there as you enter onto campus, and it's a celebration of our heritage, beginning, I guess, in many ways with Faulkner and continuing on through the day. And I think that's part of, why do so many authors? I know you're probably asked that a lot. Why are there so many authors from Mississippi? And I think it goes back to your message earlier. There's power in story.
There is.
And Mississippians are great storytellers.
And you doing well to say that. We don't have to make up anything. We have so many stories in our families and this and that. So, now tell us again the name of your book, where you can get the book, who it's published by, so let the people know.
Yeah, the name of the book is 38, The Chucky Mullins Effect. It's published by Deeds Publishing in Atlanta. You can find it at many local bookstores. But it's certainly online through Amazon and Amazon Kindle, even if you're an e-reader and you'd like to achieve that. But so if you'd like to get some copies, even signed, people can reach out to me personally, and I'm glad to do that.
Okay,
so
very good. Wonderful. See, I told you all I have the most wonderful guests. I have the most wonderful friends. So you do not want to miss any episode of Meet My Mississippi Authors and Artists on the Hill Country Network. Thank you.
Thank you. How long did we go? We had 1 minute left. Great.
All right, Steve. Thank you so much for being my guest.
It was an honor to be with you. That's a great question. You're talking about professionally or pastorally? I must be honest. I did wrestle with the call to ministry a bit in high school, but then I ran from it, like the Dickens. It's sweet molasses breeze, God country.